Good evening. We are not here to add one more religious idea to a crowded mind, nor to take sides in a theological debate. We are here because life demands contact, not argument. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Not acquaint thyself with theories about him, but with him. That is the only business before us. Now, when you stop to think of it, the central frustration of spiritual seekers is simple. The Christ is infinite. The human mind is finite. The mind, being what it is, can analyze, compare, label, quote. It can memorize scripture and parse creeds. But the mind itself, being finite, cannot embrace infinity. And so it cannot, by reaching, find Christ. It cannot, by study, corner God. It cannot, by effort, drag heaven into a concept. That is why you can read and pray and still feel an ache that says, "Why can't I feel God? Why can't I get answers? Why do I still fear?" You intensify the effort, you push harder mentally, and the distance seems to grow. You know that feeling. A kind of bright fatigue in the head and an emptiness in the chest. The mind is stretching, but it is stretching a yardstick toward a horizon. It will never reach. Again, if we are honest, our interest is not to win an argument, but to be free. Not to hold a correct position, but to be at peace. Not to recite promises, but to see them fulfilled in our homes, our bodies, our affairs. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where there is no conscious presence, there is fear, there is lack, there is mortality. Never forget that. The difference is presence, not opinion. Therefore, hear me carefully. It requires a different faculty than the faculty of the human mind. There is in you, already, an inner capacity that rises above thought. Call it intuition, call it transcendental awareness, call it the receptor of spirit. It is not emotion, it is not imagination. It does not argue and it does not guess. It receives. When quieted and awakened, it knows. Not about God, but God as presence. And when that presence announces itself, the mind itself grows still of its own accord. Anxiety loosens, the strain to reach stops, because the infinite is doing the reaching. So tonight, and in the days that follow, we are going to move in an orderly way. First, we will reason together enough to see why our old tool, mind, cannot do this work. Then, we will illustrate it until you can recognize the pattern in your own experience. And then we will practice, quietly, simply, so that this does not become an inspiration for an hour, but a measurable way of living. We will ask you not merely to listen, but to test, to watch your day, to notice whether remembrance deepens and whether harmony appears. That is our contract. Not theory, but contact. Not reaching, but receiving. Not more mind, but the awakening of the faculty that can know Christ within. Now, let us be very plain about the human scene we all know so well. When you stop to think of it, our newspapers, our hospitals, our courts, and sometimes our own kitchens are catalogs of mortality. Discord, fear, lack, sin, disease, and finally, death. And we have been tempted to ask, where is God in all this? But hear the scriptural refrain, not as poetry, but as diagnosis. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Never forget that. Liberty where presence is, mortality where presence isn't. Where there is no conscious God contact. That is not a threat. That is a statement of spiritual physics. Again, press this to its moral conclusion. If God, as active power, were present in these conditions as they appear, if God were the operating law in sin, disease, war, famine, you would be in the horrible position of blaming God for the world's ills. You would have to say, God willed cancer for this one, starvation for that one, bondage for another. And you know in your heart that cannot be. Therefore, the only honest explanation is this. These conditions are the marks of an absence, not of God's being, but of our conscious awareness of God. An absence of realized presence. Don't allow the mind to twist that. We are not saying God is not omnipresent. Life is God. God is omnipresent life. We are saying that where, in human consciousness, there is little or no God presence or God power recognized, mortality appears as cause and effect on its own plane. Think of it as sunlight in a room. The sun is out, it floods the world, but the room with the blinds closed is dark. Is the sun absent? No, the blinds are closed. Or think of it as the radio broadcast filling the air. Your receiver, not tuned, hears only static. Or electricity present in the building and the switch not thrown. So it is with God. Omnipresence is real, but peace, power, guidance, healing appear only as the blinds are opened, as the switch is thrown, as the receiver tunes, meaning as consciousness makes contact with the presence already at hand. Acquaint now thyself with Him, and be at peace. Now, after enough years of this work, you see so much of it that you know definitely. As soon as a contact with God is established, harmony is restored. First you find it inwardly. The fear loosens. The mind grows quiet without argument. A strange assurance, not of words, moves in. Then, gradually or quickly, outwardly, evidence shows. Relationships ease. Provision meets need in right form. The body responds. Situations resolve without your cleverness. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Not punishment, not reward, presence or absence of conscious contact. So our diagnosis is simple and searching. Any area of your life that registers strain, confusion, or bondage is pointing not to a divine decree against you, but to a lack of remembrance, a closed blind in consciousness. Do not condemn yourself for that. Simply recognize the variable. This frees you from blaming God and frees you from blaming man. It points you to the one thing needful: establish contact. We will come to the how of that. For now, let it be settled in you that discord is the symptom of absence. Liberty is the sign of presence, and presence becomes practical the moment you turn and recognize the I within you. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And there, inevitably, harmony begins. Now, having seen that the variable is presence, we have to be honest about the way this becomes real to us. Spiritual life does not open as a thunderclap to the mind demanding it. It unfolds by a law. First, faith. Then, evidences. In modern language, demonstrations. Then, direct knowing. At the beginning, it still is in the realm of faith, conviction without the outer proof, an inward yes that cannot yet point to a healed body or a reconciled home or supply at the door. But do not despise that day. Without that conviction, there would be no turning, no stillness, no consent. Now, let me illustrate that. Think of the explorers, Perry and Bird. Before a boot touched that white silence, they knew beyond all doubt, knew it in their bones, that the pole was there and reachable. But when you stop to think of it, that was still faith, it wasn't knowledge. Only when they reached and looked and felt the wind of that place, only when instruments registered and flags were planted, did it become knowledge. Apply that to the Christ within. In the beginning you may say, I know God is, I know Christ is within me. Beautiful. That knowing is faith. It carries you. Only when contact is made and the presence announces itself, only when the evidences begin to show up in the hours and days of your living, does the argument end. Again, this is why so many stall. They want knowledge at the threshold. They insist the mind must be satisfied before they will sit in stillness or practice remembrance. They demand a signed document from heaven before they will be quiet for 10 minutes. And so they remain permanent seekers, gathering ideas, comparing teachers, debating points, but never throwing the switch. Don't allow that. The mind cannot skip the process. The mind, being finite, cannot receive infinity as a proof before contact. It must be brought to the place of consent and then asked to stand aside. What then is our practical standard? Not how inspired you feel in a talk like this. Feelings rise and fall with weather and fatigue. We measure by evidences, harmony piling up in daily life. A temper that used to flare and now dissolves before it reaches the tongue. A need that arrives with its own provision without scheming. A body that eases without the fear argument. These are small flags being planted. As they accumulate, faith moves toward assurance. Assurance moves toward knowledge. And notice this. Evidences increase as you stop trying to reach God with the mind and begin yielding to the faculty within that receives. When quietly you recognize, I in the midst of me is the answer, and you rest, not argue. When you turn from words to inner listening. When hour by hour you practice the presence of God, acknowledge Him in all thy ways. The receiver tunes, the blinds open, and the same presence that is everywhere becomes consciously here. One bright day or one bright night, without strain and without drama, the very presence announces itself, and then you know. Not about God, God. And from that moment, the mind's insistence is overruled by a higher certainty, and life begins to take on the form of that knowing. Now we come to a sentence that, if you hear it rightly, removes a lifetime of confusion. Paul very clearly states, "The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." Hear that, not as condemnation, but as a statement of capacity. It says nothing about your worth. It says everything about the instrument you have been using. The natural man, the mind functioning through the five senses, the intellect drawing only upon memory and argument, does not receive the things of spirit, because spirit does not come through those channels. Never forget that. When you stop to think of it, the mind has a very honorable and necessary range. It can reason, compare, remember, calculate. It can analyze, classify, measure. It can project probable outcomes, arrange timetables, build bridges, balance ledgers. It can store scripture by the chapter and quote it in Greek and Hebrew. It can read all the commentaries, collect historical scenes, and construct beautiful creeds. And by the senses it can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell the entire panorama of a world. But God? God is not an object for the eye. God is not a sound for the ear. God is not a flavor on the tongue, a texture under the fingers, a fragrance in the air. Spirit is not an idea to be captured by a clever definition. Spirit is presence, life, infinity. And the mind itself, being finite, cannot embrace infinity. Here is where confusion takes hold. We try to find God as if God were a larger human being somewhere, to be located by imagination, the way you might picture a distant mountain. Or we try to find Christ as a figure walking Galilean roads 2,000 years ago, and then ask the intellect to pull that scene inside until it becomes comfort. We turn the infinite into a historical portrait or a superperson, and then we wonder why we cannot find him within. Don't allow that. You cannot reduce infinity to a thought and then demand comfort from it. Now, let me illustrate that. Not long ago, we read of an Oxford professor, brilliant mind, distinguished in letters, facing what the physicians called an incurable disease. Calmly, logically, he wrote that beyond a few remaining months, there was only extinction. The curtain comes down, the organism fails, consciousness ceases. To his intellect, trained to move only within data gathered by the senses and conclusions drawn from them, that was the honest outlook. Do you see the tragedy? Not merely the diagnosis, but the imprisonment. Without the inner faculty awakened, mind can only project a future made of its past measurements. It cannot receive what it cannot compute, and so it stares into annihilation because it has no instrument for transcendence. Again, this is the pivot on which everything turns. To know infinity, you must rise above the finite mind into a different capacity. Call it intuition, spiritual sense, the inner ear. It receives, it does not manufacture. It is like tuning the set to the right band rather than building a new station. In stillness, in consent, as the mind stands aside from concluding and defending, this inner faculty becomes receptive. Then what once sounded like foolishness, "I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am with you always," announces itself as living presence. The words are no longer sentences on a page. They are the very activity of life within you. So understand me. The mind can study religion, and it should. But only a higher inner faculty can receive spirit and know Christ within. Honor the mind for its tasks. Do not ask it to do what it cannot do. Bring it to silence. Let it consent to be the servant. And as you do, you will find that what could not be reached by thinking begins to reveal itself by being. Quietly, certainly, as presence that does the knowing in you. Now, let us speak plainly of this faculty. Because if we leave it mystical, you will try to imitate it with emotions or with imagination, and then wonder why nothing changes. This is not emotion. It is not a mood. It is not positive thinking, nor is it daydreaming. It requires no strain. It does not whip up enthusiasm to drown out fear. It is a quiet, receptive capacity that knows without reasoning. It receives. It does not manufacture. Think of it as an inner ear, an inner light, a faculty that is present beneath the chatter of the mind and the sway of feeling. When the mind stops pushing for conclusions and the emotions stop demanding comfort, this faculty becomes available. It is natural. It has been with you from the beginning. It is the part of you that, in a crisis, suddenly knows the one right word to say or the one step to take without having argued it out. Now let me illustrate that. Our inventors, scientists, artists, do they create by thinking harder and harder until a spark flies from the effort? No. After they have prepared, after they have studied and labored, the breakthrough comes when something in them touches a source deeper than analysis. Edison nods in his chair and wakes with the missing piece. Einstein does not compute his way into relativity. He daydreams a beam of light and sees. A composer hears a symphony before a single note is on the page. He then copies what he already heard. A painter sees the finished canvas and then merely lays paint where it has already appeared within. They do not pull truth out of thought. They receive it from a withinness that precedes thought. This is not religious exclusivism. It is a universal principle. They tune to the same inner current that we are calling spiritual sense, intuition, the receptor of spirit. Again, when you stop to think of it, even mathematics points this out. Elementary arithmetic is mind work, but mathematics, real mathematics, only begins when you leave what the mind can comprehend and reach out into the intuitional. Mathematicians confess that they glimpse a proof in a flash, and only afterward fill in the steps for the sake of the classroom. The insight precedes the explanation. So with the infinite Christ. The presence is discerned in a flash of still knowing. Then, if you like, the mind can arrange sentences about it. But the order is always revelation first, reasoning after. Therefore, the shift we make is simple and radical. Instead of thinking about God, we let God reveal itself. Instead of searching outward for signs, we listen inward for presence. Instead of mental strain, we practice stillness. Be still and know that I am God. Not be busy, not be worried, not be positive. Be still. Don't allow the mind to counterfeit this with autosuggestion or religious excitement. Sit quietly. Consent. Father, here am I. Then wait. Not for a voice in the air, not for a sensation in the body, but for that gentle inner assurance which needs no argument. And notice this, because it carries us to our next step. This faculty awakens most naturally when you cease identifying as the mind that tries and the body that suffers, and you take your place as the one who has a mind and has a body. I have a body, I have a mind. This mind is mine, this body is mine. I am the life of them, something the Master called I. That I is life. From that seat of I, the inner ear opens. From that identity, the Christ within is not a distant power, but the very life of your being speaking to itself. Then you are not climbing to God. You are yielding to the God that already is the I of you. Now we come to a word so close you can miss it by looking out there for it. The word is I. When you stop to think of it, Scripture keeps speaking in the first person. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am with you always. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Don't allow the mind to make this only Moses's I, only Jesus's I, only a distant God's I. Believe that it means I, the I of your own being, closer to you than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. If you place that I outside, you will search and pray and plead to a sky god and wonder why there is no answer. If you recognize that I as the life of you, you will find that the answer was speaking before the question formed. Now, identity must be stated in the language of ownership, or else the mind will run your life and call itself you. I have a body. I have a mind. This mind is mine. This body is mine. I am not in subjection to mind or body. I am the life of them. You govern that mind. You are responsible for what thoughts you permit to graze in that pasture, and what impulses you let that body carry out. Never forget that. The moment you slip into, my mind made me, or my body made me, you have abdicated the throne of I and turned dominion over to servants. Here is the great reversal that marks transition from mortal sense to spiritual awareness. Mortal belief says the body governs life. The chemistry, the nerves, the organs, the age, these dictate being. Mortal belief says the mind governs life. Moods, memories, ancestral fears, headlines, these command the day. The revelation of Christ says the opposite. Life governs mind and body. Something the Master called I, life itself, God, animates and rules. I and my Father are one. Life does not report to flesh and brain. Flesh and brain report to life. How then is Christ known? Not as a sentence in the head, not as a sacred idea polished by repetition, but as the living I announcing itself as presence within consciousness. One bright day or one quiet night, when thought grows still, that I says itself in you, not in words you invent, but as a certainty that needs no argument. I am. I am here. I am the life of you. And without fanfare the fear loosens, the pressure lifts, and the mind, finally relieved of a role it cannot play, becomes servant to what knows. Now, this cannot remain a philosophy. If the I is real, it must be consciously acknowledged, or the mind will usurp the throne by default and dictate its old decrees. Fear, disease, lack, resentment. Don't allow that. Begin to live from I. Quietly, several times a day, and we will make this an hourly remembrance. Turn within and recognize, I am the life of my body. I am the governor of my mind. I, in the midst of me, is the presence that performs that which is given me to do. Not as a battle cry, not as autosuggestion, but as consent to what already is. As you do, identity shifts, and with it, law shifts. From the jurisdiction of the natural man to the government of spirit within. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. In that I, liberty begins to live you. Now we come to the part that separates inspiration from transformation. It isn't too difficult to remember God for 10 minutes, especially in a quiet room like this, with words carrying you. The difficult thing begins an hour later, when the phone rings, the schedule tightens, the body complains, and the mind resumes its tyranny. In that hour, the old ruler climbs back on the throne and issues decrees. Hurry, fear, fix, defend. Don't allow that. If presence is the variable, then remembrance must become the law of our living. Not occasionally, not sentimentally, not only when things are soft and slow, but as a measured discipline. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, where you have forgotten, there the old bondage resumes. Therefore we take Scripture literally as instruction. Acknowledge Him in all thy ways. How? By setting, to begin with, a simple hourly pause. At the top of the hour, or as near as you can make it, you turn within. 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and you consent to presence. You do not have to kneel. You do not have to close the office. You do not have to announce anything to anyone. You quietly, secretly, shift from mind to I. Father, here am I. Be still and know that I am God. Let the shoulders drop. Let the breath find its own rhythm. The mind will offer its noise. Let it pass. You are not its captive. You are the I that owns that mind. Now, in that pause, do not plead. Do not rehearse the problem. Do not try to talk God into doing something. That is the mind trying to be important again. Simply acknowledge. I in the midst of me is the life, the wisdom, the presence. I am. I and my Father are one. Then be silent. 5 seconds of true inward consent is worth more than 5 minutes of religious argument. As the inner ear opens, as the inner assurance stirs, you have thrown the switch again. The blinds open, the receiver tunes, and without fanfare, the atmosphere within clears. By the degree of one's success in remembering, hour by hour, one can measure the rate of their spiritual progress. That is a fair standard. Forgetfulness is not guilt, it is the training field. When you discover you have gone 3 hours and only now remembered, good, you have remembered. Begin again. When you find you cannot hold quiet for more than 15 seconds, good, hold for 15, and tomorrow it will be 20. Never forget that the faculty strengthens by use and atrophies by neglect. You are not being graded in heaven. You are forming a habit on earth. After enough days of this, you will notice evidences. The first and most precious will be peace. An ease that does not come from favorable headlines or pleasant weather. Next, right action will begin to appear of its own accord. Words you did not plan to say emerge as wisdom in a difficult conversation. Steps you did not engineer open a way through a tangle. Delays prove protective. Opportunities arrive not by scheming, but by being in your place. The body, finding it is no longer governed by the mind's fear, responds. The heart quiets. The sleep restores. Pain loosens its hold. Supply takes form as sufficiency for the task at hand. Needs met rightly, not extravagantly nor scantily, but fittingly. Sometimes from sources you could not have arranged. Relationships reconcile. Resentment thaws. Forgiveness appears. Estrangements soften. Not because you convinced anyone, but because presence, acknowledged, became the law of the meeting. Now, let me illustrate that briefly so you can recognize the moment when the practice counts. You hang up from a call, and the verdict of the mind arrives. This is going wrong. In the old way, you would think faster, talk more, tighten. In the new way, you stop, right there. Close the door within and say nothing outwardly. Inwardly, a single acknowledgement. I am. I in the midst of me is enough. Then silence. Watch what happens. The pulse of fear eases. The next step, which a moment before was hidden behind panic, presents itself. One clear email, or one gracious apology, or one firm no. You didn't invent that. You received it. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So the counsel is simple and searching. Make the remembrance hourly. Guard it as you would a necessary appointment. Do not make a god of the clock, but let the clock help you back to God. And measure, not by thrills, not by religious talk, but by how often and how quickly you return. Little by little the mind's tyranny breaks. Little by little a new government settles in. And with that government come the evidences. Peace within, order without. Until remembrance is no longer an exercise you perform, but the atmosphere in which you live. Now we apply it where it hurts and where it heals. Never forget that you do not have to be the victim of your mind. Don't allow thought to stamp reality with its fear labels and then hand you the bill. The mind will rush forward with its rubber stamp and cry, I am sick, I am lacking, I am alone, I am condemned, I will fail. Those are not divine verdicts. Those are mind phenomena, old habit noises, arising from memory, suggestion, and the world's hypnosis. If you take those as judgments against your being, you place the servant on the throne and bow to it. Don't allow that. When you stop to think of it, every trouble you name begins as a claim. A sensation appears in the body, and the mind declares, "I am sick." A bill arrives, and the mind declares, "I am lacking." A silence comes from a friend, and the mind declares, "I am alone." A past misstep surfaces, and the mind declares, "I am condemned." A task looms, and the mind declares, "I will fail." Notice the pattern. The mind identifies itself as you and then passes sentence on you. But you are not the mind. You have a mind. You are the I that owns it. You govern that mind. And here is the practice. Bring every claim to the inner tribunal. What is the inner tribunal? It is the seat of I within, the quiet court where only Christ has jurisdiction. The procedure is simple, and you can carry it into any moment. When a claim appears, stop. Don't argue with it. Don't plead against it. Don't run to tell 3 people about it. Turn within. Acknowledge. I in the midst of me is the life, the law, the light. Be still. Wait, not for a sentence to repeat, not for a feeling to be manufactured, but for that quiet sense of presence which needs no proof. In that hush, the hypnotism is seen for what it is, a label without authority. The claim will either dissolve like mist, or it will stand there looking smaller, trivial, already judged without power. Understand, we are not fighting thoughts. We are not wrestling shadows. We are yielding to the faculty that knows, letting the Christ within reveal the true state of being. The mind wants a debate. Spirit offers a verdict. The mind wants evidence first. Presence is the evidence. As you sit in that inner court, the government shifts. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from fear's stamp. Liberty from the proud or panicked impulse to fix the scene with human means. Now, let me illustrate that so you can recognize the turn. The symptom spikes at 2 a.m. The mind shouts, "I am sick and it's getting worse." Do not grab the mind's megaphone. Switch courts. Sit up or stay lying there, but inwardly change forums. Father, here am I. I and my Father are one. Then be silent. In a few breaths, sometimes in a few minutes, the storm in the mind quiets. Perhaps you are led to a simple right step. Perhaps you sleep. In the morning, there is ease that cannot be traced to argument. Or the invoice arrives and panic starts its speech. Before the phone is lifted, the tribunal is convened. I in the midst of me governs supply and demand. Silence. Then, perhaps, you see the one call to make, or the needless expense to release, or the unexpected channel opens of its own accord. Guidance, protection, healing. These are the forms the inner verdict takes as it translates into your hours. Again, freedom comes when you refuse mind's verdicts and submit every appearance to the inner knowing of the Christ. Do not wait for a better mood. Convene the court now, then again, gently, hourly. With each case brought within, the mind learns its place, the body finds its law, and life begins to flow from presence rather than from panic. And you will know by the results: less strain, more right action, fewer words, truer words, dangers avoided, needs met, health restored. Not because you conquered thought, but because Christ, acknowledged, rendered judgment. And harmony, being the law of that court, appeared. Now let me illustrate that so it ceases to be a doctrine and becomes recognizable in your own hour. A woman phones just before noon, voice tight, breath shallow. There is a meeting at 1 o'clock in which she is certain her job will be threatened. She has been praying since dawn, so she says. When you stop to think of it, the praying she describes is thinking, marching scriptures across the mind like soldiers, reciting titles of God as if quantity could force safety, arguing with fear, searching for the right spiritual sentence that will finally click the lock. With every turn, the mind grows more fatigued, the body more tense. Don't allow that and call it prayer. That is effort within the same faculty that produced the fear. The natural man receiveth not. I say to her, stop. For 1 minute, do nothing. She is quiet. Say nothing, seek nothing, not even a result. Lay the verses down as you would set tools on a bench. For this minute, let the mind stand aside. We breathe together. Father, here am I. Then silence. 10 seconds. 20. 30. At 40, her voice changes without her trying to change it. Something just let go, she says. Where? I ask. Here, she answers and touches her chest. Warmth. A sense of being upheld. Not euphoria, not a trance. A quiet, grounded okayness that was not manufactured. No new idea arrived. Contact did. The inner faculty opened. Presence registered. Name what happened rightly, or you will run back to thinking and miss it. That shift was not the discovery of a better phrase. It was the cessation of mental reaching and the birth of receptivity. The I in the midst announced itself without words. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, and the first liberty is always inward. The shoulders soften, the breath finds itself. The inner verdict replaces the mind's sentence. Now watch the after effects, because spirit translates itself into form as function, as timing, as right action. She goes to the meeting. The facts do not vanish. The personalities do not change species. But she does not react. She listens. She speaks one clear, simple sentence she had not planned. The conversation pivots away from threat into problem solving. A deadline is extended. An assumption is corrected. No fireworks, just order. Later that afternoon, she notices the knot in her stomach, absent. That night, she sleeps. In another case, the body eases at once. In others, the relief comes by degrees, but the law holds. Liberty appears within first, and then writes itself outward as decisions, as composure, as the right word, as protection. This is how we know. Not because an argument persuaded us, but because presence, contacted, performs what thought could not. In a few moments, we will not talk about it. We will do it. We will sit together, become still, and let the inner ear open to the I that already is. Then you will see, quietly, certainly, what no sentence can give you. Now, for a few moments, let us meditate. Sit quietly. Let the feet find the floor, the hands rest easily. Don't arrange a result. Don't fix a problem. We are not thinking. We are listening. Let the mind, for now, Be the servant that waits at the door, rather than the ruler that commands the room. If a thought comes, let it pass as a cloud. You do not need a better thought. You need no thought. Be still and know. Within yourself, very softly, as if you were not saying it but hearing it arise, repeat the word I. Not loudly, not forcefully, gently. I. Then let there be a little space. No rush to the next. Let the surface of the water settle. Again within, I. Not as a label for a person, as the life of you, the presence of you, the Christ of you saying itself. Now let the shoulders drop from the ears. Let the breath discover a slower rhythm of its own. We are not summoning anything, we are consenting. I. And we leave a space. In that space, notice what is here when commentary pauses. Not a picture, not a phrase, a quiet aliveness, a someone that is not an object, a nearness without distance. I. As the inner ear opens, allow Scripture to be heard not as sentences on a page, but as assurance spoken to you, within you, by that I. Listen as if you were being addressed now. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Pause. Let it register. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. Pause. Be not afraid. It is I. Pause. Neither do I condemn thee. Pause. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Do not answer. Do not repeat by effort. Receive. The mind may try to craft a reply. Let it rest. The body may seek a sign. Let it be. 1. And in the quiet after that single syllable, feel how presence stands where anxiety used to stand. How an inner okayness begins to hold the space without your help. You are not making this. You are witnessing it. You are yielding to what is true before you speak. If a problem tries to rise and speak, lay it, for this minute, on the bench. I, in the midst of me, is the life, the law, the light. Then silence again. I. Hear it as near as breath, as sure as being. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And you can feel the first liberty now as a loosening within, as a weight quietly set down. We close not with excitement, but with gratitude. Thank you. Not thank you to a far God, but thank you as recognition of the I that is here, the Christ made evident as presence. Carry nothing away but this assurance. The faculty awakens in stillness, and the I will speak for itself whenever you listen. Now we carry this into the hours that wait for you. The structure is simple, and it is merciful, because the mind cannot live on inspiration. It must be governed by practice. Devote the first 10 or 15 minutes of the day to conscious recognition. Before you touch a device, before you read a headline, sit. Not for words, not for petitions, not for composing beautiful prayers. Sit to be aware of presence. Be still and know. Let the mind wait at the door. Let the body rest. Softly, inwardly, as if you were hearing it spoken. I. Then a little silence. Father, here am I. I and my Father are one. Do not try to manufacture a feeling. Consent. In that quiet, the receiver turns on. The day has a governor now. Don't allow the morning to be captured by the world before you have remembered who lives you. Then, make the remembrance hourly. You can help yourself. Set a gentle chime, a vibration on the phone, a sticky note on the corner of the screen. Simple reminders, not as a superstition, but as a servant. When it signals, stop for 30 seconds. Drop the shoulders. Let the breath find itself. Turn within. 1. Silence. Acknowledge, I in the midst of me is the life, the law, the light. Then resume, emails, numbers, conversations from inner poise. Don't make a god of the clock. Let the clock bring you to God. By the degree of your success in this hourly return, you will know your progress. Forgetfulness is only the cue to begin again. Now, weave into the day micro-returns, little pauses at thresholds where the mind would ordinarily seize command. Before you open the inbox, one breath. Father, govern the seeing and the answering. 1. Before a hard conversation, do not rehearse. Return. I in the midst of me speaks the word that is needed. Then go in. Before you drive, hands on the wheel, a quiet nod within. I go before thee to make the crooked places straight. At a doorway, a phone ring, a decision. These are bells for remembrance. Don't allow the mind to rush past them. The pause does not delay you. It delivers you to right timing. Do not retire without acknowledgement. Give the night 5 minutes, or 2, but give it. Sit on the edge of the bed, not to judge yourself, but to train remembrance. Where today did I remember? Thank you. Where did I forget? No blame. Tomorrow I return more quickly. Then, lay down inside a sentence you do not have to hold. I will never leave you, nor forsake you. Let that I keep watch. Sleep becomes prayer without words, and expect evidences. Not always dramatic, but definite. Peace arises where agitation used to sit. Guidance appears as the next simple step you could not see a minute earlier. Protection reveals itself as a missed turn that saved you, as a closed door that spared you. Supply comes as sufficiency for the task at hand, needs met rightly, in right ways. Healing often comes as a loosening first, then as function restored. After enough days of this, you see so much of it that you know definitely. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Daily structure, morning recognition, hourly return, and night acknowledgement, turns contact into living demonstration, and life, governed by I, begins to show itself orderly, quiet, and free. Now, as we come to our close, gather the thread. We began with the simple, searching fact that the infinite cannot be grasped by the finite. When you stop to think of it, the mind, itself bounded by time, space, memory, cannot hold God. And that matters, not as a theory, but because life under mind's government is the scene of absence, little or no God presence or God power. And in that absence appear the familiar discords: sin, disease, lack, fear. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord isn't, there is mortality. Never forget that. Again, we trace the honest progression. At first, it is in the realm of faith. Then evidences, what modern language calls demonstrations, begin to appear. And after enough years of it, you see so much of it that you know definitely. Finally, direct knowing. One bright day or one bright night, the very presence announces itself. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit. So a different faculty must awaken. Not thought, but intuitional receptivity. And with that awakening comes the great identity shift. I have a mind. I have a body. I am the life of them. I and my Father are one. Here is the paradox that frees you. You cannot reach infinity with thought, but infinity reveals itself when thought yields. Don't allow the mind to be your master. Don't allow it to stamp, I am sick, I am lacking, and then bow to its verdict. Bring every claim to the inner tribunal. Practice the presence. Morning recognition, hourly remembrance, before sleep acknowledgement. It isn't too difficult to be still here. The difficult thing begins an hour later. When you discover you have forgotten, that is the signal. Return. The habit of forgetting is the only enemy. Never forget that, and even that sentence will remind you to remember. If you will do this, you will have evidences. Peace where agitation sat. Guidance where guessing ruled. Protection that appears as right timing. Supply as sufficiency for the task. Healing as a loosening, and then as function restored. Not by cajoling a far God, but by consenting to the I in the midst. And then, quietly, certainly, there comes that unmistakable hour in which you do not believe in God. You know. Not with argument, not with ecstasy, but with a presence that says itself in you. I am. Be not afraid. It is I. I will never leave you, nor forsake you. So the charge is simple and searching. Go from here not to hunt for Christ with the mind, but to be found by Christ in stillness. Keep the appointment each morning, return each hour, and close the night inside acknowledgement. Don't make a god of the clock. Let the clock bring you to God. And let gratitude seal it. Thank you to the inner teacher, the eye that is nearer than hands and feet. Christ is not distant. Christ is your life. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Go in that liberty, and let it live you.